There is so much more to ancient Egypt than just the pyramids, the Sphinx, the Serapeum, the Oserion, and the unfinished obelisk. I feel like, especially over the last 4 or 5 years, these topics have been picked clean, and not really much effort has been done to shed light on other also interesting aspects of ancient Egypt. I mean, this is a kingdom that reigned for at least 3,000 years, and I know that for myself, I've been ready to see something new emerge from independent Egyptology. I actually began my anthropological career studying Egyptology, but as far as independent Egyptology goes, I could only listen to the same 3 or 4 different theories on the pyramids and the Sphinx so many times before I began craving something new. And recently, I feel like the vase scan projects have really been pushing that area forward and asking some really tough and needed questions in regards to the ancient machining and techniques needed to make these incredible vessels out of solid granite and diorite. But honestly, there are so many more strange temples and archaeological sites scattered throughout Egypt that are still overlooked. So in today's video, I want to take you through the land of ancient Egypt and show you just a few sites with megaliths you may have never seen before. And what I find so interesting about these megaliths is that they come from a time where we know as little as we do a lot about ancient Egypt, and that is during the time of the height of the Library of Alexandria. So the theme of this video is going to be set among some of Egypt's more unknown temples, at least to the vast general public. And most of these sites are said to have been constructed during the time of Egypt's final kingdom. The Ptolemaic dynasties constructed huge walled-in temples with tall and narrow corridors and gigantic columns carved with disc-shaped blocks of limestone. These stacked columns, rather than the solid granite and limestone columns seen in earlier kingdoms, are one of the aspects of later architecture that make many people see a decline in the architectural abilities of the Egyptians. But what goes largely unseen are the megalithic ceiling and slab blocks beneath your feet and far above your head when you enter these temples. For example, when you enter Dendera's famous Temple of Hathor, as we're going to do on the Cleopatra's Egypt tour, the first thing we're going to see is the gigantic lintel block sitting above the gateway. Lifted 40 feet into the air, the gate is constructed out of solid limestone, but we don't have a clear idea of when the gate was constructed, as the entire temple complex, like almost all complexes in Egypt, are comprised of new additions added every few centuries. The entrance is known today as the Gate of Domitian and Trajan, who were not pharaohs but Roman emperors between the years of 81 to 117 AD, during the time of Roman Egypt, when Egypt became a province of Rome after the siege of Alexandria and Cleopatra's death at the hands of Rome's first emperor, Augustus. This is actually one of Egypt's longest eras, lasting from 30 BC until the Arab conquest of Egypt in 671 AD. Undoubtedly, during this time, the Romans constructed many temples and monuments throughout Egypt, some entirely new and some were additions to older sites that we will also walk through at Dendera. One way that we can identify Roman monuments are by the hieroglyphs and depictions of Roman emperors on the structures, such as Trajan's kiosk, which depicts Trajan dressed in a traditional pharaoh's garb. Although somewhat disputed though, this gate at Hathor is thought to represent the Emperor Domitian interacting with the gods Hathor and Horus, meaning that the gate would have been built around the late 1st century AD if it is indeed a Roman construction and not an Egyptian construction that was usurped by the Romans. If you look closely at the lintel blocks sitting on top of the gate, you can see that they are actually 3 different blocks, the lowest block being a slab of solid granite, and the middle block being slightly smaller than the upper block. The lower Aswan granite slab, while not necessarily megalithic, still weighs in at around 3.5 tons, which is more than the average 2-ton limestone block used to construct the Great Pyramids. Each of these upper limestone blocks are about 17.5 feet long, 5 feet in depth, and about 2.5 to 3 feet in height. Their estimated tonnages are around 18.5 to 20 tons per block. Altogether, the weight resting on this gate is around 40 tons, hoisted 40 feet into the air. Now, the current theory as to how blocks like this were hoisted this high into the air is by a combination of levers, pulleys, and mud ramps, although this is always highly disputed. And if this gate really was constructed during the period of Roman Egypt after 30 BC, then it's a display of the fact that somehow this knowledge of megalithic architecture was continued and passed down to the time of Greek and Roman Egypt, or the Greeks and the Romans, working with Egyptian architects, were able to re-engineer and rediscover how to erect these massive structures. So at a lot of sites in Egypt, we're going to be floored by the sheer size and scale of the columns erected within these temples. The sheer size of the columns at Carnac Temple are nearly as impressive as the obelisks that dot the Egyptian world as well. But as you look closer, you will eventually be able to see that these columns are not solid pieces of limestone. Instead, they're created in what are called stacked drums. At Karnak, each of these limestone drums weigh around 20 tons apiece, which means each column weighs a collective 300 to 350 tons apiece. But again, these are not solid columns like the rectangular granite columns that we're going to see at the Philae Temple and at the Oserion. To see the megaliths at Karnak and the later Egyptian temples, you need to look straight up above the 70-foot tall columns. Sitting nearly 100 feet in the air are the megalithic ceiling stones, weighing an estimated 30 to 32 tons apiece. The sheer size and weight of these blocks, along with the height at which they are placed, really boggles the mind as to how they were erected using only mud ramps, levers, and pulleys. By my count, there are about 67 remaining ceiling stones, totaling at just over 2,000 tons of limestone blocks that were quarried, cut, transported, and then lifted over 70 feet into place. And that's not even counting the blocks that have fallen in the last at least 3,000 years. Furthermore, some of these ceiling blocks are even multi-layered, with either two blocks, one resting on top of the other, or they may even have a second set of multi-block rectangular columns with another ceiling block placed above that. And those smaller ceiling blocks are another estimated 18 to 20 tons. The other type of megalith found in later Egyptian temples that I'll make sure everyone keeps an eye out for are actually going to be right under our feet. Exactly like the slabs we're going to see built into the ground around and beneath the Great Pyramid, we will also see these slabs at relatively unknown sites like the Temple of Sobek, where the 2,000-year-old Nile crocodile mummies are put on full display. Not only is this temple complete with its own set of enormous drum columns and ceiling stones, the floor slabs of this temple are as large as they are numerous, each stone cut perfectly to fit alongside the next. The purpose of these extremely large stones being so perfectly cut alongside each other is not only to provide a strong foundation, but a level foundation. The ground of every single major Egyptian site was shaved away, perfectly leveled off, and then filled in with huge slabs of stone, which were cut perfectly on 6 sides to keep the foundation strong and level. If any of the foundation were to begin to slip, the columns and the entire structure as a whole would come crashing down. When you take a step back to appreciate the architecture from its foundation through its walls and columns to the megalithic doorway lintels and then the ceiling blocks, it is absolutely astonishing that these structures were built thousands of years ago and are still standing today with only the paint fading, and sometimes the paint hasn't faded at all. Furthermore, I find it mind-blowing that these feats were achieved by the world's very first recognized civilization, and they have never been surpassed. If you're interested in joining me on my very first expedition to Egypt to see all of this in person as well as every single other major Egyptian site, I'll leave a link in the description and the comment section below. I hope to see you there. So a monument in Alexandria that I personally can't wait to see is actually something that really nobody in the general public knows about. And it's actually a Roman obelisk called Pompey's Pillar. This pillar weighs 350 tons, and it's cut from a single block of Aswan rose granite, the same type of stone used in the King's Chamber of the Great Pyramid. This column weighs just as much or more than an entire drum column at the Karnak Temple. Now, with a lot of these monuments that we say are built by the Greeks and the Romans, it's really hard to know if they were actually built by the Greeks and the Romans, or if they were just Egyptian monuments originally that were usurped by the Romans. However, due to an abundance of Roman literary sources during the reign of Diocletian sometime around 300 AD, we know that this column was erected at the eastern corner of Egypt's second Serapeum built in Alexandria. And yes, Egypt actually had a second Serapeum. This Roman obelisk is the only single standing Alexandrian monument still in its original position. And I believe that it's a testament to the fact that the Romans acquired their knowledge of quarrying, cutting, and transporting megaliths from the Egyptians. And how do I know that for sure? I think it's very obvious when we look at Rome's most iconic monument besides the Colosseum, the Roman Pantheon. These enormous columns are carved out of solid blocks of Egyptian gray granite that were actually quarried in Aswan and then transported to Rome. The Romans only began construction on this scale after the siege of Alexandria in 30 BC, where they could now harness the architectural knowledge that the Egyptians had been protecting for thousands of years. In fact, while the Romans were just beginning to learn how to erect these solid granite columns after conquering Egypt in 30 BC, far away from Alexandria, in the deserts outside of Memphis, the old capital of ancient Egypt, lay toppled solid granite pillars lining the Saqqara necropolis that had been laying half covered in the shimmering sand for the last 2,600 years. You guys haven't really seen me make a lot of content on ancient Egypt because I felt for the longest time that I just didn't have much to add to the current conversations. All of the topics and theories surrounding the Great Pyramids, the Sphinx, the Oserion, the Sphinx Temple, and the unfinished obelisks as well as the vases have all been tapped endlessly, and I wasn't just going to make videos parroting what everybody else had to say just for clicks. But I study ancient Egypt a lot, basically every day. It's where my anthropology career began around 10 years ago now. And I really think it's time for someone to step in and start showing some other aspects of ancient Egypt that are so often overlooked, especially in Egypt's later eras like the Ptolemaic kingdom, where we can kind of see that this ancient knowledge from the ancient Egyptians 5,000 years ago is still around somehow, and it kind of peeks through the archaeological record. And I find that extremely fascinating. Whether it means that the ancient Greeks are learning from the Egyptians how to do this, or the ancient Greeks who were so thirsty and hungry for more and more ancient knowledge were working with Egyptian hands and learning how to re-engineer or rediscover the means by which these massive megalithic structures were created. Unfortunately, because the city of Alexandria was caught in so many battles, having its library burned multiple times and then being hit by a tsunami in the 4th century AD, we don't have a great and preserved image of the last days of Egypt. Ancient literary sources tell us that Alexandria's lighthouse, erected in around 280 BC, was built to be as tall as the Great Pyramid, which is about 450 feet tall in ancient times. And more literary sources tell us that the lighthouse was built out of 60 to 75 ton rose granite stones, quarried and transported over 600 miles from Aswan. The lighthouse was actually still standing in 1480 AD when it was deconstructed and turned into the citadel of Kate Bay that we're going to walk around as well. There are only a few of Alexandria's monuments still standing today, but I can't wait to sail for 2 weeks from Alexandria all the way down to Aswan with you guys. So again, if you're interested in joining the Cleopatra's Egypt tour in January 2025, I'll have links in the comment section and the description below. So I have a list of about 200 to 300 video topics that I'd love to get to, and it's killing me that I can't put out videos faster. I'm trying to jump from part-time to full-time on YouTube. So if you guys want more videos like this, all I ask is that you please like and subscribe for more, as that's all you have to do to help out my channel and get me to a point where I can jump to this full-time and pump out videos faster than I ever have before. Also, I need to come up with a catchy outro for these videos. So if you can think of something, please leave it in the comment section below. And if you're able to help me find something that's catchy and that I like for my channel as an outro for every video, I will be reaching out to you for your mailing address, and I'm going to send you a box full of some pretty cool stuff that I've been working on. So anyways, I'm Luke Caverns. I'll see you guys soon.